The transverse tubules, where do you see them crossing through?
Circle.
They cross from Z disc to Z disc. There is an invagination of these along these bandings. Does everybody see that? All right. So I'm going to set it over. So now, if I got that action potential, I got the influx of the sodium, I got it traveling, the way that we're going to pass the information is we're going to go from that action potential and information that we're going to get into the T tubule. The T tubule contains calcium. If the T tubule gets excited and that calcium gets riled up, the calcium is going to be released. And now that we're inside that sarcomere, where we are at the point of my actin and my myosin, the calcium attaches to troponin. The troponin, I wish I had a muscle fiber. The troponin, that little 3-unit thing, okay? Calcium's going to come in and attach to it. That's attached to the tropomyosin, the rope. What is it that that rope is covering? Overactive sites. So calcium now comes in, attaches to the troponin, shifts. When it shifts, it moves the tropomyosin, and if it moves the tropomyosin, what gets exposed? Active sites. It's okay, Morgan. You're good. Now, watch. My little 3-unit troponin. At each bend, see how it has its connection to the tropomyosin. When calcium is not present, it's in position to block the active sites. Okay? When calcium is present, calcium attaches to the troponin. The troponin will now make the tropomyosin shift, and we will now expose these active sites that were covered up. If the active sites are exposed, and if there is energy present, what happens with that myosin head? The active site's been exposed. Myosin head is already in the cocked position. Okay? Active site's now exposed. We got energy. Ka-ching, boom. ATP comes along. We get a release, but there's still calcium present, so active sites are still available. So the myosin head, ching, boom. ATP is still present, it releases, calcium is still present, another active site, boom, boom. Yes, no, maybe. So therefore, our excitation, contraction, coupling. Because the nerve signal to the acetylcholine, to the ligand gated, to sodium rushing in, to exciting the T-tubule releases the calcium attaches to the troponin makes the tropomyosin release, active sites are now available, myosin is going to get to attach, in the case of energy, it'll get to release, then as long as the calcium is still present and ATP is present, myosin heads will continue to do that. Until that nerve signal ends, the calcium goes back into the reticulum, the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and those active sites get covered back up. No more attachment with the myosin heads.
And the coupling's the excitation and activation?
Excitation and contraction.
Oh, contraction.
So, here we go. Nerve sends the action potential. Action potential causes the release of the acetylcholine. Acetylcholine crosses the cleft, attaches to the receptors, opens the gate, sodium rushes in, we pass the action potential along the fiber, we let the sodium rush in, we get excitation, we get the excited T-tubules. Excited T-tubules are going to release the calcium. Calcium is going to attach to the troponin. Troponin is going to cause the release or the movement of the tropomyosin. If tropomyosin gets to open up those active sites, the myosin heads get to attach. The myosin heads get to attach and energy is present, that head will get released. If the head gets released and calcium is still present, energy is still present, we'll have another attachment to an active site, which each time it attaches to that actin, it's pulling the actin closer and closer and closer to the M line. And that is going to continue to occur until that calcium moves back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum.
So in the case for tetanus, it means that the calcium isn't going away, and
Because the sodium doesn't stop. Now, what will eventually happen is the sodium, in the case of tetany, okay, we can deplete the stores of sodium. And then, even though there's still the signal being sent, there's no sodium to get in there, okay? But usually at that point, depending on areas where the tetany might be occurring, death might have already occurred. The muscles can withstand, the skeletal muscles, the smooth muscle can withstand certain amounts of tetany, okay? Heart cannot.
So like when someone has Bell's palsy, is that kind of a form of tetany in a way?
As far as I know, Bell's palsy, that's affecting the nerve.
Okay.
So, I don't know the full explanation for that, but I will look it up.
Because I know like people can get contracted
Yes.
with it.
So I'll look it up to see what's kind of going on with that. Charity?
So is that the same as tetanus, like what you get when you get a nail,
Okay. Now,
rusty nail? or metal?
tetanus that you might think of like with the rusty nail, the one that we get the vaccination for, okay? The reason we get that vaccination is because that tetanus will cause muscles to go into tetany, all right? The first area, there's some toxins, some bacterial toxins, like the ones found in food, the botulinum toxin, okay? The one that people get shot into their foreheads and stuff. Yeah, the botulinum, okay? The little shots, okay? Yeah, like you're gonna shoot me up with, botulinum. But what it does is it causes the muscles to go into tetany. Now, in the case of like the rusty nail, one of the first signs is the people's jaws lock up. And if that's happening, you want to get to a doctor as soon as possible. Still might be too late, but it's a good reason why if you had, if you do anything metal or anything outside really, any kind of cut, any kind of breach, they want to know when was the last tetanus shot.
Bacteria, that's caused by virus?
The one from food, is a bacteria. The one that comes from like the rusty nail and stuff, I'd have to look up and see what that toxin actually is. It might be a bacteria.
Is tetany reversible?
Yes, if caught in time.
Okay.
Yeah, if caught in time.
So when you get like a Charlie horse, what's
Uh,
happening?
A Charlie horse would be the spasming of the muscle at that point. The nerve is irritated, and what'll happen is it causes a tetany for a short amount of time. One that would be sustainable, unless it goes into a more severe type. And then you have to start looking at, well, what could be causing this? Do I need to get an MRI? Do I need to have a muscle relaxant?
Is it from the calcium though? Or where is it from?
It would be, well, it's actually the nerve being overstimulated, because remember, it can't move unless it's got the nerve. And so the nerve would be overstimulated and continuously sending an action potential, keeping the acetylcholine in the synapse, okay? And so what would happen is eventually you would deplete those sodium stores and it goes away. Or you massage and you stop the irritation from the nerve. If it's the one that continues, no matter what's done, that's where it can become an issue.
I know we're not talking about sodium potassium pump as of now, but in the case of missing, like lower potassium, and you get muscle contractions, is that just caused by, like, you know, when you have low potassium and your muscles kind of contract
Mhm.
up, is that because the lagging gated in the sodium potassium pump is?
It could be the sodium potassium pump, but it could also be an effect with those leak channels. Because remember, leak channels are more permeable to the potassium. And then if you don't have enough potassium, it seems really weird, okay? It seems backwards, all right? Like for example, if you don't have enough sodium, the muscles contract. If you've got too much, they're lethargic. And so with potassium, same thing. So you end up getting these reactions from these ions being inappropriate. But see, here's the thing. This doesn't just affect skeletal muscle. When you think about the sodiums or the potassiums, even magnesiums, because magnesium's important. Small role, but it's important. The calciums, you're going to see the process being very similar in smooth as well as cardiac. Okay? Cardiac, the cardiac muscle cannot withstand any of these changes. That's why it's so important when people have a sodium deficiency or magnesium or calcium or something like that, that they take the supplement, because the heart muscle really cannot deal with it. The smooth muscle, the muscle of the organs, they can handle it a little bit better, okay, but they're still not going to like it for those deficiencies. And the skeletal muscle will respond as either being contracted or doesn't work at all. In some cases, like for example, tetany, people, you know, before we had the vaccine, tetanus, if you got it, that was a horrible way to die, okay? There are pictures, you know, from way back where people are just completely almost bowed back like this in a U shape from the contraction of the muscles. And eventually what happens is, you know, they can't breathe anymore or anything like that, and they die. There was no cure for it. So, muscle contraction, pretty cool. So, and thinking about